Start that.
That's what I meant. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virginia Voices. We're very excited to welcome Ken Conklin and Catherine Fletcher to our third? Is this the third, Angie? Third celebration, fourth celebration of Virginia Voices. I don't know why I lost count for a minute there. I think it's those summer days. We'd like to have everybody mute themselves so that when we call on the two poets that they'll be able to, they'll be seen in the large view. So if you could all do that at this time. So I'm Cathy Hailey from the Poetry Society of Virginia's Northern Region, and my co-host is Angela Dribben from the West. And we'd like to get started by asking the poets to answer a question. Angela has already put the bios of the poets in the chat, so you can take a look at those. Maybe later on in the session, Angie, you can put them in again, just because I've noticed some people have come on after. So I'm going to start with Catherine and ask you if you could share your personal approach to poetry. This is an opportunity to really let us see who you are as a poet, what your approaches are. You can talk about any projects you've been involved with, what approach you have to writing or style, and what we can know to understand you better as a poet.
Thanks. Well, first of all, really great to be here. Thanks very much to you, Cathy and Angie, for inviting me to participate. My approach to poetry, I began really writing poetry when I was sort of off-roading from playwriting. A lot of my poems, I would say, have a sort of narrative thread to them, or sometimes sound like a dramatic monologue, I think. Writing is difficult for me. I'm a bit of a ruminator, so most of my poems take me quite a while to write. I tend to write more for the voice than for the page. I worked for a folklore organization for about a decade. I was a cultural programmer, and a lot of the oral poetry traditions that I work with, both English languages and other languages, influenced my feeling for types of poetry, and also interested in things like silence and repetition that sort of becomes incantation. I think that also links back to the many, many years I got dragged to church every Sunday. So yeah, that's definitely the early Virginia influence coming into that. It's been really interesting for me coming back to Virginia after about 30 years away, living in New York and California, because I did sort of lose my accent while I was away, but I haven't quite recovered it, but I am sort of rediscovering what could be considered my early cadences and rhythms, as well as turns of phrase that I didn't always use when I was in other parts of the country. So I'm really interested in that part of my own vocabulary, but also just really interested in sort of dialects and colloquialisms and regionalisms in general. And also how, you know, sort of the language that we use has a relationship with the land. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately.
That's fascinating. I wondered if you have a poem that you think would be a good illustration of some of the things that you just talked about that you could share with us.
You mean, I'm assuming you mean my own poem?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, sorry, just clarify. I'm going to read this. It's less about dialect and speech than it is about trying to rediscover nature, which I had unintentionally become alienated from when I lived in cities like New York and Los Angeles. So this is a piece from a series of eco poems I'm working on, and it's about a re-encountering the yard of the house I grew up in. Back garden. I cannot always tell dead from living, pruning bushes in our backyard. Some branches snap in my hands. The Japanese maple's spindly limbs, brittle from frost. Others prove to be alive, refuse to be severed cleanly, still green on the inside. Thorny silver shoots thrust through the heart of a woody shrub with broad leaves, their trunks competing with one another. Which deserves cultivation? Which should I favor? In every bed, my fingers find the sharp pricks of another holly sapling, along with the cones the pines keep dropping. And I stumble in the holes the squirrels keep digging in the grass near Jack the Cat's grave. We're days from the vernal equinox. I drink in the brightening light, yet understand so little about mulch and growth, botanical cycles. I'm distracted by the beauty of the budding flowers. I'm trying not to kill my mother's roses. This week, I learned that boxwood grows slowly, but our once familiar shrubbery has vanished. The orange-berried pyracantha and the fig tree I used to climb, whose green fruit I cracked to watch the milk seep onto my fingers. Now I gape at leaves I don't recognize. I don't know the differences between weeds and wanted plants. Should I pull the rangy invasive stalks which seduced the bees last summer? Are the dark berries from the long grasses poisonous? My father could have told me. He could have named their names. I left this house and yard years before, remade myself with education, muted accent, cultural trends, until sickness and death, love and obligation bid me back. Now I have no other place to go. No foreign sabbatical, no outer borough flat. This is all. I cannot fish or farm or hunt. I researched to remind myself what chickweed looks like, though I have memories of plucking it from our lawn. I think I saw it at a market on my last trip to the city at $4 a bunch. Last week, I pulled some from the family plot. My hands twist in vines climbing the fence my parents built to prevent my toddler escapes. Nicks and scratches cover me. It takes so long to heal these days. I turn toward approaching footsteps, but it's the wind, tossing another pine cone. Perched above, a catbird taunts, mew mew, as I trace echoes. Dropping the hedge clippers, I wonder whether it's already too late to be pruning.
Beautiful, Catherine. I love the way that you pose so many questions. First, a little bit more general about what deserves cultivation, and then later, more specifically about individual plants, but then also draw your parents in, even the cemetery and even your cat's grave. You have so much that you're able to bring into that poem. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Ken, let's go to you. And if you could tell us a little bit about your approach to writing poetry, how you go about it, or
Sure.
kinds of poetry, and then give us an illustration.
Okay, sure. So first of all, thank you, Angie and Cathy, for hosting this and inviting me to it. I actually consider myself an accidental poet. I began writing highly personal poems in the late 1960s and early 1970s for cathartic reasons. The 1970s were tumultuous years for me, packed with emotional ups and downs. I had no plans to publish or share them widely. I'd let a few friends read them, and then the poems would eventually end up in a folder or a notebook. But it kind of became a habit, and I continued to write poems, essays, random thoughts until really the present day. My poetry reflects my emotions at the time. At the time the poems are composed, they are really centered on me and what I'm experiencing at the moment. And they usually come out spontaneously. I have to admit that my compulsion to put my feelings into words is kind of inspired by singer-songwriters. We tend to view poets separate from those that make a name for themselves as songwriters, but I truly believe that some of the world's great poems are the lyrics to songs. And of course, Bob Dylan was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for having created new poetic, in quotation marks, having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. And Bob Marley is remembered in his native Jamaica as a poet. For me, my early poems were inspired by the lyrics of Jackson Browne, Cat Stevens, Paul Simon, Leon Russell, and Joni Mitchell. But I really believe that one of the great poets of our time is Bernie Taupin. If his name isn't familiar, these lyrics may be. Hold me closer, tiny dancer, count the headlights on the highway, lay me down in sheets of linen, you had a busy day today. He wrote the lyrics to most of Elton John's songs. I find his most obscure ones are the best, especially those from the Elton John album, Tumbleweed Connection. Later, I looked at artists such as Keb Mo, Leonard Cohen, and Tracy Chapman. And since landing here in Virginia, I've followed James McMurtry, Daryl Scott, Nico Case, and Jay Farrar. I often have music playing when I write, be it prose, music provides a rhythm to the sentences and the lines that I write. And the genre that I listen to range from soft rock to hard rock to jazz to classical. And it all depends on my mood and what I'm writing at the time. So my poems are usually are a spontaneous flow of words that I just have to catch quickly enough. I tinker with them somewhat after they get on paper. The words come out and I capture the emotions I'm experiencing at the time. In my early years of writing, they often came out dark. I'm finding the ones I write today are more reflective, but still reflect my state of mind at the moment. And when I write prose, I set aside a time of day to do so. But when it comes to poetry, it's at the moment. So that's really how I approach it.
And I understand you have some short poems, so you might read two in some of these segments.
Okay, they are somewhat short. I'd like to start with one that three of my poems are going to be included in the soon to be published Poets Society of Virginia's Centennial Anthology. And so this first one is one of them. I wrote this particular one at some point in the 1970s, and it really remained unpublished until my collection of poems, The Zen of Ken, was published last year. I have to give you a trigger warning. Many of my poems are dark and gloomy. So this one is called Darling of Darkness. Darling of darkness, where are you now? I've danced on dark clouds. I've played on the bow. I've tried new roads and looked at the old. I've marched up and down alleys. I've stood out in the cold. I've lived by the clock with no sense of time. Spent a lot on nothing with my last dime. Told people about me without listening to them. Fallen deeply in love and back out again. Fallen deeper still, didn't like the trash. Learned not to kill, but paid in cash. Been up to the top to see what was there. I saw nothing I wanted, but stood there to stare. Now I am floating in space without air, hoping to find someone to share all the dreams of my mind and thoughts of despair. But mostly I need someone who cares.
Very nice. You might have had a dark image or two there, but I didn't find it as dark as I thought when you gave us the warning.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
So Angie had mentioned something about having two short ones in some of the segments. Is that for this segment, or should I go back to Catherine?
so certainly, certainly I can do another one here if that's what the timing works out, right? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So this next poem, which was also included in the anthology, this poem was my career was spent in the technology industry, and the company I was working for in California was going through changes. IBM made me an offer to join them on the East Coast for an incubator business that was attempting to enter the fledgling GPS business at the time. I lived in Hermosa Beach on the South Bay of Los Angeles County at that time. And I put together this poem about leaving 4th Street. I will leave behind my gardening tools and the special shelves I built for the kitchen pantry. The ocean continues to pound, as it always has, while the seagulls circle and screech. I will never open this front door again to my home at the beach. The bamboo branches are mourning while the moving van is loaded. With all my stuff eastward bound, its diesel engine idling. I wave goodbye to neighbors. Come see us soon. I will never open this front door again to my home at the beach. While my favorite chair is finally loaded, as is the to beach sign pointing west. Be well, old eucalyptus friend, be at one with the salt-laced breeze. Why won't someone convince me to stay or reinstate the job I lost? I will never leave for just the day again and return to my home at the beach.
Thank you, Ken. I really like the way you juxtapose the constant aspects of the nature in the poem with the leaving and the things that you'll be saying goodbye to.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
So, Catherine, would you like to do another poem now? And then I'll ask you the question about the Poetry Society of Virginia.
Sure, thanks, Cathy. So I'm going to continue on with another poem from that series that I'm working on, Eco Poems. This is me re-encountering a space in this part of Norfolk in Tidewater, Virginia, marshy space that I used to go to on walks with my mother and my brother sometimes. And it, again, deals with this sort of space that I'm trying to learn. And then I'm also looking at this environment through my animal neighbors. Landscape with unmarked path. Another sun-soaked afternoon. Heat buzzing. A fever in my feet. I follow the breeze and the rhythm of summer's past. Cross my neighborhood to river's edge. Gasp. A snowy winged bird with back-bent knees hunts in the marsh. 1 foot, mud sunk and invisible. The other mid-stride through cord grasses and bubbles. On shoreline rocks, I misstep. From elsewhere, mother's voice ripples. Stay very still. So I stop, sensing this familiar place while her presence grows, hovering over my shoulder, in my hand, pulsing. The egret becomes taller. His plumage glows. He jabs the water, scoops a minnow into his narrow beak, shakes it from side to side. He lifts his head skyward, neck extending from curve to line as the fish wriggles and disappears in the gulp. A synchrony of egrets, present and past, lights the moment. I surrender to mother's command, merge with the being of the cove. But 2 shouting kids cycle by, and the bird bolts from the grasses into the air. Sweat trickles from my elbow crease to wrist as I notice my untouched hand. I stand on the shore, linger in the absence.
Thank you, Catherine.
Listen.
It's really interesting to me how your mother enters that poem in such a full way. Very nice. So you've been in the Poetry Society of Virginia for a while, or was it when you came back to Virginia that you joined?
I joined when I came back to Virginia. I was really looking for community, for like-minded people. And I was excited by some of the programs that the Poetry Society was doing locally, but I also really was excited about the possibility of connecting with poets from other parts of Virginia, which I've been able to do and traditionally did through the big May conference and things like that. But I've been really enjoying the programs that we've been able to do on Zoom. I know that, sometimes we feel a bit shortchanged in the arts by what's happened to live events because of the pandemic, but I feel like there've been more possibilities like this program. Cathy and Angie, you both have done some great programs online, whether it was talking about, publishing, or, Cathy did a great reading dedicated to Ukraine in the spring. And I, not being able to get out to Western Virginia or Northern Virginia all that often, I really think that putting some of our programming on Zoom has been great to sort of build more solidarity within the society. So I think that's been one thing that's really exciting about this time. And I also just wanted to say some of the in-person events too. I know Angie did an ekphrastic event with an Appalachian photo exhibition with the Piedmont Arts Center. And I was when I was still doing social media for the PSV, there were lots of comments about that, and they seem very excited about it. And then George Mendez here in the Southeastern region is trying to bring literary poets and spoken word poets together with events at the venue on 35th Street. So I feel like that's another really cool thing that the Poetry Society is doing.
Absolutely. I'm excited about that as well. And have never been there, but was hoping that, one of these days I'd get to go to the venue at 35th and see what it's like. And I agree with you, although I've been in the Poetry Society for a while and, did attend events in Williamsburg and in Richmond, in addition to Northern Virginia, I really feel like I've been able to do more because of the opportunities with Zoom. And even though I haven't met a lot of people in person, I feel like I know them, at least to some extent through the Zoom opportunities.
Definitely.
Ken, how about you? You could either start with poetry or with answering that question, whichever. I'll leave it up to you.
I'll go ahead and answer the question now. Just kind of continuing, as I said before, I'm really an accidental poet, and I've been writing poems for a couple of decades and putting them in my little folders and files and little pieces of paper, but that's where they stayed. But in 2014, I noticed that Botetourt County Libraries was holding a poetry contest, and I decided to participate. The judge was Charlie Finn, and I believe he might be listening in or part of our group here today. He's a well-known local poet, and I also participated in 2015 and 2016. My poems were recognized with awards each year. The contests were discontinued, but I didn't pursue any more public readings, and certainly not publication. But the experience buoyed my confidence, and I began to explore the haiku form of poetry at that point, as well as continuing the poems that I wrote. It was also about that time I became aware of the remarkable life of Botetourt County native Norval Lee, and a desire to know more about this unknown American hero sent me on a journey of a lifetime. Resulted in the book that I wrote about him. The book itself has led to to several unanticipated paths. The book inspired the Virginia legislature to designate a portion of US 220 in Botetourt County, the Norval Lee Memorial Highway, and in mid-September, a historical marker will be passed along. And all that seems poetic, I think. But it also, I was also at that time, was contacted by Cyberwit. They saw the book and they looked me up, and it's the only reason I can understand how they knew I dabbled in poetry. Cyberwit is a foreign-based worldwide publisher of poetry books. To this day, like I said, I don't know how they found out, but they said if I could get some poems together, they would publish them, no cost to me. So I spent several months going through scraps of paper I found in various folders and notebooks and selected the ones I felt were appropriate, including the ones in haiku. Cyberwit published The Zen of Ken last year. Unbeknownst to me, my wife was on distribution for the Poets Society of Virginia Facebook feed. She suggested that now that I was a published poet, I ought to join. So I did. So in a little over a year, I went from being a new member to a reading at the Taubman Museum, which is a brand new experience for me, to becoming a member of the Centennial Committee, and now participating in today's program. I'm very grateful for all these new experiences.
How wonderful. We appreciate your volunteering.
Thank you. For my next poem, I'll give a little preamble. When we moved east, we first went to Poughkeepsie, New York, and then soon after up to Burlington, Vermont, which to my extreme delight has a very eclectic music scene. You may recognize a couple of the groups that got their start there. Both Fish and the Grace Potter and the Nocturnals started there. I became close friends with one of the luminary musicians there. Kip Meeker is his name, but his first name was Sheldon. He had his opportunities to break out onto the national scene, but self-imposed obstacles kept him from doing so. The title of this poem, They Don't Make Forever Like They Used To, is also the title of one of his songs. At the One Half Lounge, crooning Sail Away, or Georgia on My Mind, or Pour Me Another Vacation. Sometimes meeting me at Muddy Waters, drinking coffee, lamenting about the times, paranoia setting in, pettiness robbing your genius. You finally let go of the drugs and the alcohol, never the women though, and certainly never the artistry. And such songs they were, with Hendrix and Webb, with some Sinatra sprinkled in to keep us grounded. And at the Iridium, when Les Paul himself invited you on stage, you brought the house down, as you knew you would. In the key of Wichita Lineman, you painted a picture for me, and Oriental irises, and to this day it is there. In the time you cried, letting your Bukowski shield down, your uncloaked heart showing your brilliance misunderstood. You would hate that YouTube has you now, but you welcomed the band of angels saying, Sheldon, we are coming to carry you home. We are coming to carry you home.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I really like all the musical connections that you brought in.
Yes, thank you.
So, Catherine, let's go to the third question. And this is continuing with your thoughts on the Poetry Society of Virginia. I know you talked about some of the things that you've enjoyed seeing happen recently, some improvements that have brought people together, but what else do you see when you think about the potential of another 100 years of Poetry Society of Virginia? What are the things that you'd like to see us moving toward?
I really thought that Luisa Agloria's Young Poets in the Community program was a really great step for connecting young poets around the Commonwealth, but also connecting us older folks with, really energetic, excited young people excited about poetry. So I'd really like to see that program continue. I kind of, would love to see something as a centennial event with local history, like, Ken was just talking about, or dialects, or, regional stories. So maybe that could be an event in the form of dramatic monologues by, little known Virginia characters. I'm thinking about like Bob Arthur's poems that he sometimes writes in dialects from the Eastern Shore. He's got one in like Deal Island dialect, and just kind of like celebrating really hyper-local information in Virginia poetry. I'd really love to see an event and or a series of like chapbooks or something about those types of things. I guess that's one of my pitches for the Centennial Committee.
I actually love that. I think that there is some mention of a bit of that in the call for proposals that we have now put out for centennial presentations at the May 456 festival in Richmond. But I like the little details that you went into in terms of dialect and in terms of people's voices in dramatic monologue, and also about the really detailed local history, like Ken's example with the book he wrote. And I'll pass that along, because it may be that it already exists to some extent, but understanding that focus might make it, it might affect the choices that are made by the committee. So thank you.
And the one other thing I'd like to see maybe is a little bit more with just an occasional translation event. There are lots of really great literary translators working in Virginia. There are people speaking other languages here, so it would be really cool to have an occasional spotlight on that type of work.
I love that idea. Thank you. And I encourage you to speak up or speak out about the applause for Luisa Gloria's project, the Young Poets in the Community. The idea came up at the most recent board meeting, but there was no absolute decision about what we're going to do about it. And it's really important that we do something about it now, because it's almost school starting time. So
Right.
I hope you'll reach out. Another delay is that we don't have a Virginia Poet Laureate yet, because although the names were submitted a couple months ago, no decision has come from the governor's office yet. And I think one option was to see if that poet laureate might want to help continue that project. But I think we should do it regardless, since we sort of agreed to do that when Luisa appealed to us first as a board last year. So thank you.
It's a great project, and there's some really great young poets that were part of it. I mean, yeah. I was lucky enough to hear a couple of them, and they're really terrific.
I agree, and we are inviting them to the Centennial Festival. So not all of them necessarily, but definitely some of them. So thank you. And what poem would you like to read now?
I'm actually going to also continue turning my eyes from Virginia to the world beyond. The coverage of the war in Ukraine, maybe just with the exception of the news this morning about what happened in Crimea, has kind of receded from American news.
Yes.
But it's still very much ongoing. So this is a poem inspired by that conflict, and it's dedicated to those fighting against the violent forces that wish to destroy democracies. Crows over Busha, or Why Crows Are Black. In between streetlights, bare trees line the road, where crows' nests clump high in their branches. The air reeks of smoke from smoldering homes. Their facade's absence exposes kitchen tables split, plates and glasses smashed, mattresses torched to hot coils. Curtains hang like gauze on windows. For hours, the crows have been hovering, their dark wings outstretched, weaving paths in the sky. The barrage of gunfire and shells has gone silent. The masked chaotics, makers of storms, at last have retreated from this town. Roar, 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 roar. The birds' warnings rise and resound. Who will hear them? A cyclist, legs torn by shrapnel, lies tangled in his bicycle, shot mid-pedal. A young woman, hands above her head, lies by her open car door. Windshield spidered and punched with holes, an older woman slumps in the front seat. In back, 3 dead children huddled together. The crows do not roost. They do not sleep. Roar, roar, they cry, their eyes wide and dark, witnesses to the days, the faceless chaotics. May the clouds rain fire. May the earth change color. 5 men, hands bound, lie face down in a yard, its vegetable garden trampled and blood-soaked, an Alsatian with a mangled muzzle dumped in a wheelbarrow. Along the main road, trees have been burned to spiky stumps, grass churned to mud. The school and apartments hollowed, crumbled stone mixes with chaotic beer cans and shell casings. A small group of townfolk trudge past them. Beside a gaping trench, they stand and stare and tremble at bluish hands protruding from fresh-turned ground. A cassock-clad figure approaches the open graves, begins to chant. Rawr, 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 the crows croak and continue circling. The air fills with brutal harmonies of clergy, birds, and shovels scraping. Crows behold this land as it's stripped, bombed beyond winter. With each horror these chaotics inflict, the crows' storm-colored feathers become blacker. Thanks for listening.
That's so powerful, and I'm sure the others of you feel the same way. But you recognize some of those images because you've seen something similar on news programs or in newspapers and online, and it's just awful. But I really admire the way that you were able to incorporate the crows and tie them through the poem.
Thanks. It was actually an image I briefly saw. And, the visual of the devastation, but also the crows circling just sent me there. And there are lots of witnesses to this war. And, it affects many of us.
Yeah, and crows included. Absolutely, thank you. So we have a little bit more time, and so I'm going to suggest that each of you read another poem. But let me ask a couple of things. Ken, do you have either any of the haiku that you've been writing, or possibly another poem with musical ties?
Another poem with musical ties. Interesting. I do have several haiku in here. Here's one that is musical.
Okay.
But as you know, they are very, haiku is quite short. But
Absolutely. No, but you can read the other musical poem too.
right. Okay. This is entitled Jazz Talking. Snarky puppy chords, sparking synapsed ideas, origins abound. Okay. I can find one give me a moment.
Ken, did you answer the third question or did I skip that?
You skipped it.
Okay, we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
Or you can do it now, either way.
Okay, I'll read this particular poem, continuing with the Burlington, Vermont theme. It's entitled At Muddy Waters, and there is some music in it. At Muddy Waters, Burlington, Vermont. Bernie, the senator, just came and went, ordering a French roast. Elvis Presley playing over the sound system. Then some Lucinda Williams. Here comes the Tourette person, grunting and groaning, and possibly female UVM student with their possibly female mentor, discussing Karl Marx, but short skirts are now in here. A street person just came in, or maybe he's a college professor wishing he was something different. The old man keeps writing in his usual perch, while people in cars move down Main Street. And now comes Radiohead over the sound system at Muddy Waters, Burlington, Vermont.
Nice, thank you.
Sure.
I like that Bernie made an appearance there.
He did. That was Muddy Waters was one of my very favorite little coffee places to go into there.
Nice.
Regarding the next 100 years of being, as you know, I'm really quite new to the organization, so I'm really not up to speed with all the outreach programs we have in place and what's going on with them. But I'm hoping we can introduce a diverse population of young people to the genre. I think that should just be the real objective here over the next number of years. I'm hoping that this centennial celebration could serve as a springboard for this outreach. I've been part of the discussion regarding having a young person's session at the centennial. I think this is just an excellent start. And as you know, we are soliciting proposals for readings and workshops at the centennial. And I think we can attract young people by being open to modern forms of poetry, for example, video poetry and rap poetry. I would think that young people would gravitate to such forms and possibly call them their own. Excuse me. We also might consider partnering with organizations such as the Alliance for Young Artists and Writers, also engaging local public educators and libraries by suggesting we sponsor poetry programs within their system, their systems and organization. And that's about what I have for that response. I think to bring young people in, we need to have a kind of a proactive engagement process by all of us that are members.
Absolutely. And did I keep you from reading another poem that you had planned? I had 3 poems planned, so now I'm scrambling to come up with the other 2. Okay, well, if we have time, I'll come back to you then, okay?
Okay.
Catherine, did you find another poem that you'd like to read?
Yes, I'm going to end with a happy poem, Cathy.
Lovely.
And I apologize. I pulled this one up on Microsoft Word, so if I click with my mouse, sorry about the sound effects.
No problem.
So this is going to link into Ken's Southern California memories, I hope. It's one of my favorite memories of Southern California. It's called Flying Kites with Hailey. Oh, glistening Pacific. Santa Monica turquoise dream ripples as we cross the hill to the beach. The afternoon pregnant with the magic a purple satchel might contain. You wet your finger while I raise my gaze and search for the wind's path. Spool gripped in your small hand, line taut, I cradle your kite and turn. Ready? I nod, noting the rising swell. Run, Hailey, run. You smile, legs churning, you sprint down the strand and the kite climbs, climbs, climbs. I jog behind. Watch the wire from the lifeguard stand. You swerve, face even brighter as the parafoil sails into the light. Your fingers nimble with the winder, you punch your feet into the sand. But then our nylon adventurer plummets, smacks a weekday sunbather on the feet. She jerks her head and scowls. Sorry, yanks down her hat, retreats to her sleep. You take off again. The kite lifts its striped face, puff with the size of Southland leisure, swoops side to side, loops, tail fluttering. Such a clear sky. We could float all the way to Catalina. Your eyes shine the color of waves. Cheeks glow with an 8-year-old gap-toothed grin. Line tugging your hands, you groove to the rhythm like it's some future high school dance. You're cruising discovery, and I am your delighted passenger. Soon we'll trot down the path to find your mother and brother swinging on Muscle Beach rings. But in this moment, Hailey, you make me fly, and I don't ever want to come to Earth again.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Ken?
Okay, I have two rather short ones that I can put together. One is angst filled and the other is more positive. So, this one's called Metastasized Waltz. It all started a long time ago, rooted in key places where I would not be found until I could not hide anymore. I grew up, you see, and like a child leaving home, I left the confines of my sanctuary to see what else was out there and to express myself. Once I got going, it was easy to move around, welcomed here and welcomed there. No space-time continuum, not an impedance to the coming of my gospel. I am everywhere now, in key locations, spreading the nature of my existence, but there is rebellion now, slowing my progress. I am tired of laying down my tracks. I might just settle down right here, where I can hide out or lay low until the quiet comes again.
Very nice.
And this is Vibes of Fate. It was unexpected the way you came into my life, like a welcome breeze, just like I had always known you, to remind me to enjoy the sunshine and the fate of whatever happens is supposed to happen for us to learn from, as I have learned from you, transposing your energy and quiet vibes to everything I do and to make me recognize with each passing year the astounding presence of you in my life.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Beautiful. I think it's interesting. Each time we've had one of these gatherings, we've found that there are some connections between the poets that we didn't know existed. And it's interesting that you've had not just California experience, but also New York experience, even though you're both, here in Virginia. And just the details of the world around you find their way into your poetry. And you both, even though Ken, your poems weren't all about nature, when nature was there, it was definitely with the respect that Catherine, you show in your nature poems, and then the voices of both your poems, those voices of real people, especially in your last poem, Catherine, and in the musical poems and those last ones of yours, Ken. So it's so interesting to see how often we find connections. Angela, did you have anything you wanted to add in this last few minutes?
I'm glad y'all decided to move to Virginia. Thank you for being here and being part of the Poetry Society.
I must say that we were only going to be here a couple of years, and it's now 17 years later.
Oh my
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow, glad you're here.
Yeah.
And I guess I did want to say, Catherine, I'm very serious about submitting a call, submitting a proposal to the submissions call. I mean, you've already got it written in what you just said. And so, and to anyone else who, you do not have to be a PSV member to submit a proposal. And this is I think this is one of our answers to what Catherine and Ken both expressed. wanting to see over the next 100 years. Like, this is why we're doing a call for proposals. So rather than just curate everything among the names that we know, we want to know your name. Like, we want to know all the names, and we want people to come and share what they know. So I'll just put that link here one more time. And everyone here, think about it. Catherine, I'll be looking for yours.
Yes.
Thanks for the encouragement, Angie. Appreciate it.
And let's all give an applause for both Ken and Catherine's beautiful poetry.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate being here. It's great to share a bit of time with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, in terms of what Angie was just saying about the festival and the goal with the proposals, do you hear the thunder here? Because it's really loud all of a sudden.
Yes.
My apologies. But this Virginia Voices series is also giving us the opportunity to find out who our voices are in Virginia. And although Angie and I committed together to doing this for 1 year, we've already started talking about having more people that we want to interview and hear from. And so I don't know, somebody is going to need to continue it beyond the year. We'll have to decide whether it will be us or whether we'll be looking for someone else. So keep it in mind. Well, shall we
Say goodbye.
go ahead and say goodbye? And
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this.
Thank you.
Another wonderful episode.
to look for more of it.
Thank you. Looking forward to the next one, you guys.
Great. Yep.
Thank you so much. We'd appreciate if you come back and meet the next people. The next people will be Kaniki Jakarta, who's from Alexandria, and Kathleen Decker from Williamsburg area. Catherine, do you know, is it Williamsburg, I think?
Yes, that general area. I don't know whether she's Williamsburg or Yorktown, but yes.
Right, one of those, yeah.
Up 64 that way.
Right. Anyway, well, thank you so much. Appreciate all of your being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you, Barbara. Thank you for coming. I've grown to expect you, Barbara.
Okay.
I look forward to it.
Great.
Mm.
I just got to blurt out, that was so great.
I'm so glad.
I'm glad
That
you're
was
here.
fabulous.
I'm glad
These are
you're
great. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank y'all for doing this. It's
here.
awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for inspiring it.
Absolutely.
That's on you.
Hmm.
This is great. All right. I'm going to quit saying this is great over and over. Thank y'all for doing it though. It's really wonderful. Have a good night.
You
You
too.
too, Karen. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.